Welcome, everybody, to episode 65 of VR Roundtable. My name is Anthony, and of course, I am joined by Steve. Steve, what is up?
Nothing much. Pretty boring week actually. Didn't have very many new games to play, but just been playing some of the recent releases, and looking forward to next week with Fallout coming out.
Absolutely. Well, actually, in a matter of hours, actually, really. Gary, how's it going? How's it going in England right now?
Oh, it's good over here. Yeah, a little bit of snow over here at the moment. So, yeah, I've been out doing the usual snow-based activities today. But yeah, it's been good. It's good over here.
Alrighty, and we do not have Chris this week. It is finals week for Chris, so Chris is hitting the books hard, and he's going to do very well on his finals next week. But unfortunately, we do not have him for this episode. So it's going to be me, Steve, and Gary are going to be going ahead and doing this episode for you guys this week. I did want to say that we are going to get into a discussion later in this episode about Rift Core 2.0. And if you want to go ahead and jump to that discussion immediately, you can. We do have the timestamps in our episode where you can go ahead and hit that little show more button and just select the timestamp for whatever story you want to jump to, and you can go ahead and jump right to that. But what we're going to do is we're going to get into some news, and we're going to get into some game discussion, and then we'll go ahead and get into Rift Core 2.0. Okay, so let's go ahead and start off with the news. Our number one story this week is PlayStation VR has officially hit the 2 million unit mark. Now, Sony has announced this, that as of December 3rd, they have passed this 2 million mark and also sold 12.2 million units of PlayStation VR software. So I'll go ahead and kick it over to Steve. Steve, what do you think about Sony has passed this 2 million mark?
You know, they're coming out and saying it now, but we were thinking, I believe we talked about it, but maybe I'm misremembering, but I thought they would have hit 2 million already by now, because they kind of came out around 1.5, and it seemed like they would have crossed 2 million by now. But who knows? Maybe they've just waited to now to start speaking about it to go along with their sort of their recent what I call a push, because they've been pushing a lot of game announcements out. You know, we had PSX this week, but then also wasn't very long ago we had the Paris week as well, and it feels like they have a lot of momentum. So maybe they've timed it with that. But either way, like it's good news. They are commanding the market, I think, in premium, in the premium VR segment. And what I mean by that is basically the non-mobile, the non-gear VR and Daydream and stuff. And kudos, like they've done a good job. I like my PlayStation VR, and I hope a lot of people take notice of this and pick one up this Christmas to help further the market.
Gary, what about you? What do you think about this 2 million plateau?
Oh, it's great. Yeah. Like Steve, I mean, I would have sort of assumed that they've sold a fair few more than that, based on just the rate of things, because we heard a long time ago that they had surpassed 1 million units. And since then, we keep hearing reports about how, due to various discounts and stuff like that, how they've sold so many thousand units in a month period or whatever. So I would assume it would be over that. But like, you know, it could be a case that these are slightly older figures. Again, either way, it doesn't matter. 2 million units is a great figure. And actually, Epic's 911, who's got his VR channel, he did a news story on this, and he did a little bit of maths on this as well. He was just talking about how the ratio of games, so there's 2 million headsets that have been sold, and also I think he said that there's 12 million VR games that have been sold. Now this points to the fact that on average every PSVR user has bought 6 VR games, and this ratio is identical to the number of just PlayStation 4 users that have purchased games. So 6 games is also the number of games that the average PlayStation 4 user has purchased. So this ratio points to a healthy console, really. If you count the PSVR as a separate console, it's a healthy console. It's matching really what the PS4 is doing. It was just an interesting insight that Epic's made on that, and I just wanted to bring that up. But yeah, I mean, 2 million figures is great.
Yeah, the attach rate is interesting because I know, being in the PlayStation VR subreddit, Man, there are so many people on there that have bought like 20, 30 games. I mean, one individual person, and it seems like the attach rate is crazy high. But then, of course, you have a lot of people where they just get the Skyrim bundle and it's just all Skyrim all the time. They haven't bought anything else or, one other major title like that. But yeah, the attach rate is a great indicator of health when you don't have a ton of numbers yet. So that looks good as well. And of course, I'm not sure if we have this in our news stories, but PlayStation VR is going to have this $199 price for a number of days. It's going to be a limited time deal, but I think this is one of the biggest news stories that's out there. And it's kind of amazing to me that there isn't that much talk about this. You go to, say, like NeoGAF or something, you would think this would be a major point of discussion. PSVR for $199. I know it's temporary, but still, you would think at this $199, I mean, that's a magic number. Here in the United States, I don't know how many times in the video game market, once you hit that $199 price, there's something psychological about that is a trigger point for so many fence sitters to jump on. This is temporary, but Steve, I'm going to go to you. Do you think this $199 price will grab a lot of these fence sitters? And is there any, I mean, are you wondering, like, why is there not more scuttlebutt about this?
Probably because for the last few weeks you've been able to get a unit for $199 through the Black Friday sales and all that. So it's not that new. It is a new sale. There are breaking points, and this sale's over, this sale begins. But for the most part, if you wanted to pick up a PlayStation VR the past few weeks, you've been able to get one in and around that $199 price here and there. Now, what I would love to see them do is make it permanent. Now, I'm not sure, but some of this may be them trying to move out the Rev 1 units because the Rev 2 units are like in the Skyrim bundle, and I don't know if you can buy a Rev 2 unit off the store shelves yet. I don't believe you can. So they still may be just trying to move out and clear out that Rev 1 unit, get the non-HDR pass-through out of the processing box, kind of get that stigma behind them, because I know they caught a lot of flack for that. So I could see it being both ways, just kind of thinking it through. Could they be steering to get the price down to $199 sort of in perpetuity, or they're just clearing out old stock? Either way, it's a good opportunity if you're semi-interested in VR to pick one up, or if you have a Rift and you don't have a PlayStation VR, you have a PlayStation 4, it's probably a good time. Just go ahead and do it. I don't see it getting much cheaper anytime soon, because at this point, you're kind of hitting, to get below $199, I don't know what it's going to take to get there. So $199 seems like a safe entry point if you're worried about cost.
Yeah, I do have to say that the $199 package, it does include one camera and it includes Gran Turismo, but you do not get the Move controllers. So you would still need to possibly pick up some Move controllers. Gran Turismo is a great pack-in because you don't need the Move controllers, obviously. Gary, what are your thoughts about this $199 price? Because, I mean, I've said it repeatedly. I'm a little bit surprised it's not such mainstream news. You have any thoughts on that?
Nothing other than the fact that I've ordered one, because there was a post on the Oculus subreddit just before we came on to record the show, actually, where they said that you can now pick up over in the UK, you can order from Amazon.com, the US Amazon, and even with all the shipping fees and all the import duties and all this kind of stuff, it's still working out £204, which is an incredible deal for a PlayStation VR. I mean, $199 over here in the UK, that translates to around about £150. I mean, if we could get a deal like that over here, I think you'd see sort of mass adoption from everybody that owns a PS4. But even having to import it from the US, it's still a great deal. So yeah, this Gran Turismo bundle, which is the one that I've gone for, it is, from what I've heard, it is the old unit. So it's the original PSVR unit. I'm not too bothered about that myself, but to Steve's point, it does seem to make sense that perhaps they're doing this deal to sort of shift old stock to get to the revision 2 version of PSVR now. So that, because any other bundle that you want to go for, which could possibly or potentially include the Revision 2 version, you can't get that for the $199. So it is just this one specific deal. But I mean, what an incredible price! I think if you are even slightly curious about VR, this is the one to go for. I mean, especially if you own a PS4 already.
Absolutely. And now the pressure is on Chris. So, Chris, keep studying those finals, but the pressure is on you. Although it is more of a situation where, I mean, I really think anybody that has a PlayStation 4, whether you have a Rift or a Vive, if you have a PlayStation 4 in another room, you're kind of doing yourself a disservice if you don't pick one of these up, because at this price, it's just hard not to do it. And then it's just the momentum that PlayStation VR has. One thing that we're going to need to do now that Gary has jumped on this bandwagon is maybe after you've had your PSVR for a couple of weeks, we could do some type of PlayStation VR special and talk to you about all of the PSVR exclusives that you never had a chance to play, and you finally had a chance to play them. I can't wait to get your impressions of games like Bound and London Heist from PlayStation VR Worlds and Tumble VR, and just so many PSVR exclusives that haven't made the journey to Oculus Rift or HTC Vive. It'll be very interesting to hear your takes on that.
Yeah, just on that point quickly, Anthony, because I've barely used a PSVR. I've only used one really once when I went to EGX a couple of years ago, I think it was, which is an event over here in the UK where I tried Windlands, and I was quite impressed with the PSVR. But just this past week, I went into a retail store and there was a PSVR just on a demo station, but nobody was using it. No one was even demoing it. So I just sort of on the off chance, I picked it up and tried it. And part of the reason I've actually gone in to purchase this PSVR is the fact that I was so impressed with it. Just when you consider the hardware that this is running on, the spec of the HMD, everything looks pretty clear in there. There is blurring, but in terms of screen door effect, it's almost lower than the Vive, I would say, of actual screen door effects, even though the overall effects of the PSVR is slightly more blurry. And also things like field of view. I think it's, very comparable to both headsets, the Rift and the Vive. There's absolutely nothing wrong with the PSVR. I was very impressed when I tried it last week.
Absolutely. And we continue, of course, in this PSVR line of thinking as we get to our next story. PlayStation, once a year, they've been doing this in December where they've been having the PlayStation Experience. And it's kind of a celebration of everything PlayStation. They're kind of giving back to the fans a little bit. And they make a lot of different announcements. There's usually a lot of games for people to try out. And we were wondering this year as we headed towards it, were there going to be some major game announcements? And absolutely. I mean, PSVR has a cornucopia of announcements that have come out recently, and we'll go ahead and try to hit these real quick. One of the biggest announcements is Firewall 0 Hour. Now, this is coming from First Contact Entertainment, and I actually was reading about this on the PlayStation blog, and Adam Orth is now working for First Contact Entertainment. Now, if you guys don't know who Adam Orth is, he's the guy that was involved way back in the days with the Xbox One when it was going to be an online console. He was the guy that had that statement, #deal with it. And then he ended up getting fired from Microsoft. I mean, there was a big kerfuffle about that whole thing. And then he ended up leaving Xbox, and he worked on Adrift. And we all know about Adrift. And, there were complaints about Adrift not using motion controls and all that sort of thing. Well, now he's actually with First Contact Entertainment, and he was talking about Firewall 0 Hour. They released a trailer for this. Looks very similar to kind of like a Rainbow Six type game in VR, 4x4 tactical shooter. I'll kick it over to Steve. Steve, I know you've probably seen this trailer. What is your thoughts?
I'm very excited about this game, and so is a lot of the PlayStation VR community. It's being really compared to Rainbow Six Siege, and that's not a game I've played. But around the same time, I believe, I was playing a game called SOCOM. There was SOCOM 2, and various ones after that. But I put I believe like 400 hours into SOCOM 2. I played in the clan, and it was really the only thing I was playing for quite a while. I was in college at the time, and this feels like it could be sort of a SOCOM or I guess a Rainbow Six Siege title that could have people really stick with it for a long time, sort of like PlayStation's own Onward or something like that, and which is we know is one of the most successful VR games on the Vive and on Steam, and it has a community that has stuck with it really well. So I'm pretty excited for this game. The only critique I would have is I don't know why it took them this long to come out with a game using this formula. It seems like this is something they would have come out with 6 months ago, because guess what? People like online shooters. Like, who would have thunk?
Yeah, it's funny though. There actually are multiple games in this category coming to PlayStation VR. We have Bravo Team, a little bit different, but that's coming on March 7th. And then there's also a game called Zero Killed, which used to be known as Special Forces VR. That's also coming. And now you have Firewall 0 Hours. So there's actually 3 of them that are kind of competing in a similar line. So basically, we just need one of these to hit a home run, and then we'll be good from that standpoint. Another major announcement, this one really hit me personally, is Wipeout Omega Collection VR. And so I remember when PlayStation VR was first announced, I instantly thought of Wipeout VR. I've been a Wipeout fan for as long as I can remember. I remember getting the original PlayStation, and I got Wipeout for that. And it was one of those games that just kind of totally blew me away. Such a giant leap forward. And now we're going to have the Omega Collection, which features tracks from Wipeout HD, Wipeout Fury, Wipeout 2048, all kinds of tracks. They've been remastered in 4K. There's new audio. But what we're getting now is we're getting VR support, and there's going to be several different ships that the entire cockpits are redone, and it's going to have head tracking and all of that. So really looking forward to that announcement. I mean, looking forward to the arrival of that. And that's supposedly sometime early in 2018. The other good news with this Wipeout Omega Collection, if you already own it, there's nothing you need to buy. This is a free update for everybody out there. And if you don't own it, you might be able to find a physical version a little cheaper than the digital version if you can track one of those down. So maybe keep your eyes out for that. Now, another major announcement that happened here is Accounting Plus. And this is interesting actually for Vive, Rift, for everybody in the VR community, because we heard that Squanch Games, which is formerly Squanch Tendo, that they were going to be announcing something major at the Game Awards. And this actually kind of happened at the Game Awards, but Accounting Plus was announced, and it's kind of basically accounting on PlayStation VR, except with a lot of bonus material, a lot of extra bonus stuff, possibly twice as much content as the free accounting. Now I'm going to go over to Gary. Gary, when this was first announced, there was a bit of an uproar in the Vive and Rift community, kind of like, hey, what about us? We're not getting Accounting Plus. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, accounting as a game, because it was a free experience to us, I believe. So, accounting was great. I thought, because just the humor, I'm not a big Rick and Morty fan or anything like that. But I thought that the humor in accounting was very, very well done. And you didn't have to have any history. You didn't need to know about Rick and Morty or anything like that. You could have gone straight into this and just enjoyed it, as I did. So yeah, Accounting Plus, it's got some extra content. It's going for $12, I believe, when it comes out on PSVR, So, they've got to add some content on there. When I played through accounting, I think I did it in around 20 minutes. So even if they double the content, I would expect a little bit more than sort of 40 minutes of entertainment through this. I hope it's got a lot more content in it overall. But yeah, it's a little bit disappointing for Vive users if this doesn't eventually come to Vive. I'm sure it will. I don't see any reason why it wouldn't, because even if they do have presumably an exclusivity agreement with Sony on this, then it will come to Vive and Rift eventually. So yeah, but either way, you can't. I don't see a big reason to complain about it, because we had a great taster of it for free. So yeah, that's all good.
Absolutely. And so a lot of other games were announced. One was called Jupiter and Mars. And this is actually coming from two former 1UP OneUp.com employees, James Milkey and Sam Kennedy. These guys worked. I don't know if you guys remember OneUp.com, but it was kind of a decent video game site for a while there that basically got left in the dust now. But James Milkey, I know he worked with like Q Entertainment, with Mizuguchi, like moved to Japan, and he worked there for a while. I think he worked on Res Infinite maybe a little bit, or I might be confusing it with something else. But he came back to the United States and they started this new company, and their first game is Jupiter and Mars, which appears to be starring these two dolphins, and it's kind of like a futuristic planet Earth where the humans are gone. Looks really cool. That's going to be coming sometime in 2018. Speaking of Rick and Morty, Rick and Morty virtual reality is going to be coming to PlayStation VR, and that should be happening hopefully in early 2018. So that's coming. By the way, Accounting Plus is December 19th. Forgot to mention that. So that's coming very soon. The Last Guardian VR experience is coming on December 12th, just a couple of days. Kick it over to Steve. Steve, can you not wait to see Trico in full virtual reality?
I think it's pretty cool. Like, people are really into that world, and Eco and Shadow of Colossus, is the spiritual predecessor to this, made by the same studio. I get why people would be excited. Now, this game, the game that it's based off of, it was in development for a long time. It was supposed to be a PS3 game, and it eventually came out on PS4, and it sort of had too long of a development cycle. So I never got to it because VR came out, and I was playing VR, and The Last Guardian really wasn't on my list anymore, but I was at one point very excited for the game. So having this VR experience is going to be good, I think. And one thing, I don't know if you mentioned it, if I missed it, but it's free. And it comes out next week on the 12th, and it's standalone, so you don't have to have the base Last Guardian game to check this out. So really, there's nothing bad to say. It's win-win all around, right?
Yeah, it's about a 15 to 20 minute experience, the way I understand it. And Gary, what do you think? Like, they have this 15 to 20 minute experience of The Last Guardian in VR. Is there any possibility that maybe a little bit later on down the line, they'll have an entire VR version of The Last Guardian? If they can do 15 to 20 minutes, why can't they do the entire game? Any possibility for that?
Who knows? I mean, I guess with all of these things, we see so many things that come out, like the Final Fantasy experience. That was a fishing game, but I think, Steve, you spoke to this, and I've read in other places it was slightly more expanded than just a straightforward fishing game, and they seem to be sort of dipping their toes in. A lot of companies dip their toes into VR, but without making any real commitment to it, and it's all interesting because I wonder, in a few years' time, will we be getting some of these experiences? It all depends on the reaction to all of this stuff. Bethesda, you see, they're sort of the pioneers in all this because of Doom VFR, Skyrim, and then Fallout 4 that's coming out next week. I guess there will be a lot of eyes on Bethesda to see how well they have done, and if they don't release any sort of numbers on this stuff because they don't need to, it's just really how they progress beyond that. If they commit to VR beyond this initial stage where they're converting older games to VR, if Bethesda come out and say at the next E3 that Skyrim, Elder Scrolls 6 will be a VR game as well as a flat game, then that will be interesting. It will point to the fact that they see VR as a viable option for people as well. And I think that will get a lot of other companies involved in this. So, the Last Guardian VR experience, it's great. It's free. We'll all try it. But it's sort of dipping their toes in. These developers are dipping their toes into VR without even committing too much to it.
Absolutely. And a few other announcements. There's been a lot of cross-pollination from PSVR games going to Rift and Vive, and then from Rift and Vive games going to PSVR. And we have two more of these. Knockout League is going to be coming to PlayStation VR, and Killing Floor Incursion is also coming to PlayStation VR. So a lot of back and forth there. It's good to get these solid games going to. Honestly, I love it when a lot of these games, I can say they're available for all three platforms. And it's like everybody can try it out. It's just, I really like it when that's the situation. But one of the big little pieces of news that we got here is that Dreams, remember that game Dreams? I mean, we speak of The Last Guardian. The Last Guardian is a game that took seeming like a decade for it to come out. Dreams has been in development for an incredibly lengthy period of time. And we got the trailer for Dreams. And this, I believe, was on Friday night, but in the trailer for Dreams, at about the 37-second mark of the trailer, you see what looks like two hands, and it looks very much kind of like a PSVR footage was just mixed in there real quick. And so everybody was like, yeah, Dreams is going to be VR. And then I believe on Saturday, there was actually a roundtable with some of the Dreams developers, and they did confirm that Dreams will have support for PSVR, although it's not coming immediately. It's kind of like they're going to be releasing Dreams, and then the PSVR support is going to come a little bit later. Steve, what's your thoughts about Dreams in general, and then also the PSVR support?
You know, I didn't watch it. Dreams is so I have a lot of appreciation for Media Molecule. I think Little Big Planet 1, 2, and 3. I like the concept, but for me, I couldn't get in on the execution. I didn't want to actually make levels, and you could play other people's levels, and that was okay, but it wasn't as good as platforming as, say, Mario. Like the whole novelty, the whole impression of it was based in the fact that they created this engine. So what they did was really, really impressive. I just didn't find it very fun. Dreams, I need to look closer at it to really be able to comment. But my gut instinct is that I'm going to probably feel similar to it as I do Little Big Planet, which is to say that I respect it, but it's probably not going to be for me. But at the same time, I get that, if you have like a kid that's the right age group, 8, 9, 10 years old, that's just super creative and, has all the time in the world to spend building levels and stuff, like this could be a very good experience for them. So, I think it's good. I think it gives the platform some diversity. So I think it's great that they're finally coming out with it, and I wish Media Molecule success with it. And I'm glad that they finally confirmed the VR support. But I'm personally not going to be, hankering down to spend hours making levels.
It's going to be interesting to see how exactly the PSVR support is going to work with that game, because watching the newest trailer for it, it is pretty incredible what they're doing with Dreams. I mean, there's so many different little styles of games that they show in the trailer, just little snippets of like side-scrolling action adventure kind of games that look like they're from the 16-bit era, but just pumped up to a new level. Like, how is that going to work in VR? Are we going to be able to do the third person stuff in VR? So it looks really interesting. Gary, I know you're over there in England. That's where Media Molecule is from. Were you a big Little Big Planet guy when that hit PlayStation 3? Do you have any excitement for Dreams?
I wasn't a big Little Big Planet guy, no. And in fact, I've never even played that game. I do know what it was trying to do, and I was very interested in what it was trying to do, but I never played it. Now, Dreams, you see, I watched this trailer, and like you say, Anthony, this has been going on for a long time. We've been seeing trailers coming out, and it's very difficult to get your head around what Dreams exactly is. I think it's cleared it up now with the PSX. So it's not really a game, it's a creation tool. And if you want to create games or create short animated movies, you can do that within this and then share them with other people. So other people can then sort of, as Steve alluded to, like Little Big Planet, you can then play it as a game because you're playing other people's creations. And I guess similar to what Steve was saying, I wonder about the market for this kind of stuff, because in theory, it sounds incredible, but whether you actually want to go in there and play other people's little games that they've made, other than a handful of people that are really trying hard and really trying to put out some great content, whether there'll be enough there to keep the average gamer entertained. But, as a creation tool, I think it's got its merits. Now, it's interesting because this is not on a PC or anything. This is a console. This is a console game. So it needs to be sort of it doesn't need to be too complex. You want to jump straight in and have something out there that you don't need to think too much about, I would say, just so you can get some kind of feedback straight away. I'm really interested in Dreams, and especially the VR aspect of it, because before they were showing some parts of Dreams in some an event a few years ago where they were using Move controllers to sort of mold characters within the game. And, if you can do all that kind of stuff, mold your characters in almost like a tilt brush kind of experience where you can mold these NPCs that you can then place into your game and interact with. I think it's great. I just don't know how well people will adopt it. That's all. That's my only concern. I think it's a good idea in theory.
Of course, we don't know when in 2018 it's coming, so it could be quite late in 2018, so we might have to wait a little while. What we're not going to have to wait a tremendous amount of time for, though, is Golem. This game has been dated for March 13th, and this, of course, is coming from Marty O'Donnell, the composer for Halo. He started his own studio, and this game, Golem, like I think on my old PlayStation VR box from the launch, on the back of my box, it had a picture of Golem on there. We haven't heard of this thing for a long time. People thought it got canceled, but it's alive and well. It's coming on March 13th, so that's another one we can look forward to. And so that pretty much wraps up all of the PlayStation Experience game announcements. But we also did, of course, have the Game Awards show, and there was a major announcement there, and this is more for HTC Vive and Oculus Rift owners to pay attention to. Alchemy Labs, one of the better developers in virtual reality, period. Obviously, they brought us Job Simulator, and then they brought us Rick and Morty. They were purchased by Google, and we kind of wondered, how is that going to affect things? Are these guys still going to make games? Are they going to be Daydream only? But what we did get an announcement at the Game Awards show that Vacation Simulator is their next big game. And this looks kind of like almost an unofficial sequel to Job Simulator. Obviously, in Job Simulator, you're a human that wants to see what it was like way back in the days when humans actually had to work for a living. And in this situation, you want to see what it's like when humans went on vacation and what were vacations like. And of course, you have the various job bots and the little robots that are floating around acting silly. Steve, what's your thoughts on Vacation Simulator? Any disappointment at all that this is just kind of another one of those kinds of games?
Not really, because Job Simulator is very successful, and I'm speaking not from my own personal taste. I wasn't a huge fan of Job Simulator. I really liked virtual reality, so I don't think it's so much Alchemy Labs and what they produce, but just what they're going for with these games. So I don't see myself personally being a major player of a Vacation Simulator, but I think it's great for the market because I know Job Simulator was one of the most popular VR games, one of the most YouTube watch games. I had a kid in my neighborhood who doesn't have VR at all that sits around and watches Job Simulator. People play Job Simulator, and he found out I had it, and it blew his mind. He was like, he wanted to come over and play Job Simulator. So I think it's just great for that reason. Get more kids, get more people interested in the medium.
Gary, what about you? Any disappointment at all that Alchemy Labs seems to be kind of sticking with this formula to a degree? I mean, we had a lot of complaints when Rick and Morty was first launched that it was just kind of a skin of Job Simulator with a Rick and Morty skin. Now we have the vacation thing. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, very slightly disappointed. I mean, I was a big fan of Job Simulator anyway, and so are my kids, so I can't really complain too much. What I was expecting was, and we'd already gone past this point, I would say, but I was sort of expecting a sort of add-ons, extra jobs for Job Simulator, and I believe they actually said they were going to do that at one point. Not long after Job Simulator came out, and it was a big success in terms of VR. That I thought they were going to sort of just build upon that and give us extra jobs. It turns out that they've decided to do this sequel. I mean, I'd say, it is a sequel because they've got exactly the same, these monitors, these floating monitors and things like that are in this game, exactly the same as Job Simulator. So they've been working on that. when Job Simulator came out, it was a great title. Will this be a disappointment for people that even like Job Simulator? I don't know, because I don't want more of the same. I don't really want more Job Simulator. I want them to take it to the next level. What that level is, I don't know. So we'll have to see what they come out with.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I'll say to Alchemy Labs, I know Steve never was like a huge fan of Job Simulator, but the one thing that they do, I think, better than any other developer in VR, like how many times have you guys been in a VR game? I know you've experienced this. You get into a VR game and you realize that certain things are interactable, but a lot of stuff isn't. And you'll go somewhere and there will be a table and there's a hammer laying on the table. And what do? Instinctively, you try to grab the hammer. And sometimes that hammer is just glued to the table and it's not really something that can be touched. Or you see a drawer and you instinctively try to open the drawer, or a cabinet. Or I remember I was in Oregon Quarter, actually. This is recently. I was in Oregon Quarter. They have these refrigerators, right? And my first instinct is to try to open the refrigerator and see if I can look in the refrigerator. And they had a microwave. And I thought, can I hit this button? Will the microwave door open up? And in so many VR games, it doesn't work like that. Very, very few things are actually interactive. But in Job Simulator and Rick and Morty, most of the stuff that they put in front of you is very interactive. And that's kind of why I thought maybe Google was so interested in them, because they were at a much higher level than most of these companies in terms of interactivity. I mean, once you get hands in VR, you want to use your hands. You want to pick things up. You want to manipulate things. And they're really good at that. So I am kind of excited for Vacation Simulator. Okay, so speaking of the Game Awards themselves, we, of course, had the best VR/AR game. And we did have a winner, Resident Evil 7. Steve can go ahead and celebrate right now. It took home the grand prize. Steve, what do you think? RE7, #1 game of the year.
A lot of people are pretty much against it, right? Like they think that it won because it is, just the most popular game and all that. And what we know though, however, is that the Game Awards are 90% panel and 10% user votes. So I don't know if it was just because it was the most popular game in terms of the masses out there casting their vote for it, but it won. Like, I think it's a great game. It's my favorite game, so I don't have much else to say. I love it.
Gary, now of the available nominees, so we had, of course, Resident Evil 7 was one of the nominees. You had Farpoint, you had Lone Echo, you had Star Trek Bridge Crew, and then there's one other I think I'm forgetting. Anybody remember?
Yeah, I can't remember.
Super Hot?
Super hot. Yeah, super hot. Okay. So of those 5 potential games, which I mean, this is kind of maybe a preview towards our Game of the Year show, but would you have picked RE7 out of that group?
Well, I couldn't, because I haven't played it in VR, and I haven't played a couple of these games in VR. So it's difficult for me. I mean, of those ones, if I was to make a choice, Lone Echo would without a doubt be the one. Although I will say, I think Super Hot, as narrow in scope as that game is, I still enjoyed it. I really enjoyed Super Hot, so I think it deserves its place. But as a full, complete experience, Lone Echo would definitely be the one for me. Now, the other ones like Farpoint and Resident Evil 7, these are games that they got really praised when they were released, and I wish I had some sort of context of these awards overall, because I don't feel like I've got a good basis. A lot of people, on the Vive subreddit were saying, Lone Echo should have won. Whether a lot of those people have played Resident Evil 7 in VR and Lone Echo, I don't know. But for me, I can't comment overall. Lone Echo is a great game, though.
Yeah, maybe we'll have to get back to you on that question in about 2 or 3 weeks. And you might have tried some of these other games by that point. But yes, Super Hot, it's hard for me to think of Super Hot as the VR Game of the Year for 2017, because I remember it from December of last year, on the Oculus Rift. So it doesn't seem like a 2017 game. The one thing I'll say about Resident Evil 7 is a lot of times with these awards, there can be somewhat of a recency bias. And a lot of times games that come out in January, February, and March a lot of times they get the short end of the stick, and usually more recent games are the ones that win. So that is impressive that it came out, late January, and it's an old game at this point, but it still took home the top prize. So that's good.
With that in mind, and everyone's watching the show's no secret that I love this game. I held off on playing all the DLC because I knew that I would be coming back to this game late in the year, and next week on the 12th, the 12th is a very busy day. The two new DLCs, Not a Hero, which is free to everybody who has the game, and then the End of Zoe, which I believe is $15. That's what most of the DLC was going for. I thought I had it written down. Yep, $15. And it's I've gone back now this week and played the banned footage volume 1 and 2, and it reaffirms my feelings on the game, because I was sort of not fully, I guess, confident that if I went back into Resident Evil 7 after playing Robo Recall and Lone Echo and Wilson's Heart and Skyrim now, like if it would have still stood up, or did I just have sort of this very fond memory in my mind that really didn't reflect the experience that I had. And going back into it and playing this just the DLC, not the main game, and it reaffirmed it, that the feeling they're able to invoke, and it's why it's my choice still as my favorite game, is they're able to invoke a
spoilers.
Yeah, there's no real spoiler there. The way I feel inside that place, like they have just absolutely nailed the ambience, and Lone Echo is a close second, and we'll get on into this in more detail when we do our Game of the Year show ourselves, but yeah, I just absolutely love this game, and I'm standing by my decision, not out of stubbornness, but I gave it the scientific method, and it still stands up.
Well, one thing we can consider when it comes to Game of the Year is that there is still one more little game that hasn't come out yet. And that, of course, is Fallout 4 VR. And there is a number of little news subjects that popped up with this game recently. First of all, we found out it's actually coming out on December 11th. We've already kind of alluded to this, but Fallout 4 VR will be available on Monday, December 11th at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern time. So we're getting it a little bit early. And then the other thing that we found out is Bethesda released a YouTube video that kind of explains basically how you control different things, the smooth locomotion, the teleporting, how you use your Pip-Boy, stuff like that. Why don't I go over to Gary? Gary, did you check out this YouTube video that Bethesda released? And do you feel like it does a pretty good job in getting people prepared for the arrival?
I don't know how good a job the video did overall, but it was good to watch. I mean, we're all hyped for Fallout 4 VR, and I enjoyed watching it. So the format of the video is somebody who works at Bethesda is sort of showing somebody how to play Fallout in VR, and they're going through the motion controllers and the different teleportation and free locomotion methods that the game employs. I get that they went straight into that, and I guess that's pretty good, because they sort of speak into one of the main concerns to a lot of the people that are going to be playing this game. They want locomotion options.
You had said that last week, Gary, you, when we were talking about Doom VFR. You're like, I don't understand why these game companies keep this stuff a secret. Why don't they just come out and get in front of the stuff and tell us what the locomotion methods are and all that? And it looks like they heard you. They must have been watching the show.
Well, of course. I mean, I'm sure they do watch the show, of course, but yeah, I think it's good that they have come out there and they've given all these locomotion options, and then they went into various other things about the game. It's just a good video. If you're hyped for this game, it's a good video to watch. I think it's great. But just on the specs, I wanted to talk about this because, again, very similar to Doom VFR. Let's just run through these. The specs are very high for this game. So the minimum is a GTX 1070 or a AMD RX Vega 56, and the CPU is an i5 4590, which is the minimum for a VR computer anyway. So that's all fine. But then the recommended specs, same as Doom VFR. This is sort of very, very high GTX 1080 or a Core i7 6700K. So these are really, really high spec systems that they're going for on this. it's sort of a little bit concerning because you're limiting the market of people. If somebody is sort of casually going onto the Steam page, somebody who even has VR doesn't necessarily follow it to the letter, like goes onto Reddit every day and goes onto Upload or Road to VR and sees all the news and things like that. If you're just somebody that is interested in VR and then you go onto the Steam page and see these specs, you could be under the impression that you had a pretty good system, and yet you've not got the system to run this game. It's difficult because they're limiting the market, and I do worry that people, even if they're really into VR, the sales of this game won't be to the point where they could be. It is what it is, I guess. I'm sure they've tried to optimize the game as much as they can, but I wish they could have got these specs down slightly. Even if they give options, more options, graphical options, I mean.
Do you guys know where does Bethesda normally stand when releasing a game on PC? Are they, I don't know the right words here, but are they competitive, or are they aligned in their minimum and recommended specs with other games kind of releasing at the same time, or do they maybe have a history of always kind of coming in on the high side of the recommended specs?
I don't believe they generally come in on the high side. I mean, I'm not absolutely certain on that. I believe they're pretty much average, unfortunately, because a lot of their games, when they come out, they're sort of bug-ridden, and they do have this issue where sometimes there are frame FPS issues, and stuff like that. But I don't know overall whether that's the case, because these are high. But yeah.
Sometimes I think when you have these specs that jump up to a higher level, it does a good job of preparing people for the possible worst case scenarios. Like for myself personally with Doom VFR, seeing how high the specs were, it's like if I go into Doom VFR and I have some issues with Doom VFR, I'm not really ranting and raving about Doom VFR having major problems because I don't have the specs, and so it's kind of like my fault. So it kind of puts it on me. And so I kind of have this warning ahead of time that, this is going to be pretty harsh. And if you're not coming to play with the highest end system, you might have a little bit of problems. So it's kind of a damned if you do, damned if you don't sort of thing. But yeah, it will be interesting to see. I mean, obviously when this comes out on Monday, it's going to be all Fallout all the time, man. We're going to have to deal with like a week of Reddit. This is what the PSVR subreddit people had to deal with when it came to Skyrim. Every single thread, Skyrim, and it's going to take a while. And I imagine the same exact thing is going to happen with Fallout 4 VR. What I'm really excited about is the more that I play Skyrim VR on PlayStation VR, and just how magical it is to be in VR, because we've had VR now for like almost 2 years, it seems. And we've had a number of experiences that are kind of open world, go anywhere. I mean, a few little things that kind of try to do that, but we just haven't seen anything like this. I mean, if you haven't played Skyrim VR, you don't know what it's like to be in a true go anywhere situation in VR. It takes it to a new magical level. And the beautiful thing about Fallout 4 on Monday and Tuesday, when everybody gets their hands on this, is all the Vive and hopefully Rift owners won't have a problem either, but they're all going to find out just how magical this is. The one fly in the ointment is they're going to find out what it's like to stand for like an hour and a half. So I kind of understand why Steve has gone the sit down route with Skyrim VR, because it can get a bit tiring, just standing up for that long. But it's really going to be exciting to see how all this plays out on Monday.
I think a lot of people are going to have issues with really what Fallout is going to be, and I've not played the game, so I can't speak of direct experience, but having played Skyrim and watching this the video that they put out, right, like it is motion controlled, and we know we have smooth locomotion, which is fantastic news, unlike Doom VFR. However, it's still, I'm assuming it's still very push button to do activity. So yeah, you got motion controls to aim your gun, but outside of that, it's going to be a gamepad filling game. You're not going to be bending down to the ground to loot off of bodies. You're not going to be eating food necessarily by bringing it up to your mouth. It's not going to play like an Alchemy Labs game. It's going to play like a press button to do this action, press button to do this action. But your hands, your Pip-Boy and your gun are motion controlled. And I think a lot of the critique, in particularly our Vive, is sort of against that thing. They want that interactivity. They want to do the actions. And I think this is a big point, because this game likely isn't going to do that. And again, I've not played it, and I'm judging a lot off of what I've seen in the video and off of my experience with Skyrim. But if this ends up being the case, I'm very curious as to if that community grows to accept it, because it's their game, or if it becomes a very polarizing game where people go, I'm not going to play Fallout because it's not true, in air quotes, VR.
That would be disappointing to me, just from the standpoint that, look, we know this game was not built from scratch for VR. This game already existed. They converted it to VR. And yeah, it's not going to have that Alchemy Labs kind of feel to it. But then, people shouldn't expect that. Now, maybe the next Fallout, the next Skyrim, the future one that they create, if that one lacks it, then we have a viable complaint there. But one of the other things like about Skyrim that I have to get to is like just walking through the world, the NPC characters, they'll just start talking to you. Like you'll be walking down the road, they'll turn, they'll look at you, they'll start talking to you. Now, if you do want to get into an actual dialogue situation with them, you have to get a little bit closer to them and you hit the move button to start the dialogue. But I've been in Skyrim a number of times, and I'm just walking through an area, and there's like a campsite with these two guys by the fire, and they just start talking to me. Like this one guy's just talking to me, and then I hear a voice over here, and it's this other guy, and he's talking major shit about me, and I'm looking at this guy over there. And being in VR and having like good voice work, how many VR games have we been in that there's voice work, but it's just not that good? And see, what I said about Skyrim a couple weeks ago is they spent I don't know, $200 million making Skyrim. I know that sounds outrageous, but they could have easily spent that and made all that back plus more. And we get all those benefits for free. All these areas that are created, all the dialogue that's recorded. And then just when you discover a new city and it makes that little da-da-dung, it makes those little like those kind of little audio cues, we don't get that a lot in these indie games that we're playing. And so I can't wait to see the Vive community and hopefully the Rift community. Hopefully there aren't problems there. I just can't wait to see what their reactions are to this kind of a game. And I hope they don't go that criticism route. But of course, if there's something to criticize about, we know how that happens. So
I think it's okay to have the criticism there, but at the same time, as Steve says, it's an adapted game. It wasn't made for VR originally, so that they're adapting it. And there are going to be some annoyances. There's going to be a lot of criticism for this game, just the way, what Steve was talking about there in terms of gamepad. Like people talk about how when you bring the Pip-Boy up, you have to scroll through the screen using the touchpad. You can't point with the other motion controller or anything like that. So these are all little nuances within the game which will get a lot of criticism. But at the same time, things like the Solus project, okay, this is a game that was originally a flat game, and then the developer converted it to VR, and that has very similar problems. But that game, I see a lot of people say how good that game is, and I think it's a great game. The Solus project really is a good game, but it has these similar problems where you can't just bend down and pick up a rock or something like that. You point at the rock with the controller, press a button, and then it's in your inventory or in your hand. So I think Fallout will work in a very similar way to that. And as you say, Anthony, I think you're absolutely right in what you were saying there in terms of this. We need to be a little bit tolerant of this game because it's been adapted to VR. If the next one, if Bethesda do pursue this route in the long term and make the next Fallout game or the next Skyrim for VR as well, and it still behaves this way, I think you're right. We will have more of an issue and more of a right to complain against this stuff. With this one, I'm willing to sort of concede some of these annoyances, these VR annoyances, because it's still early days.
Alrighty. And then, so basically, the last little news tidbit we have is that there was a VR Focus interview with Jason Rubin at Oculus Unwrapped. I have a confession to make. I have not seen this one. So one of you guys can go ahead and take over and tell us about this interview.
Yeah, I can. I put this in the notes because I just wanted to mention it. I watched this last night, VR Focus. So we'll try and get a link into the description on this so people can watch it. It was just a really interesting interview. So Jason Rubin was talking to somebody from VR Focus, and it was quite an open interview. It was a little bit stilted to begin with, but as both the interviewer and the interviewee got into it, it's quite interesting. But yeah, I've not got a lot to say. I don't want to, that they go into various things like the Oculus Go and that kind of stuff, but I just wanted to put this in the show just as a recommendation for people to watch.
You know what, though? Wasn't there some news that came out of this? I remember on the Oculus subreddit, no CV2 in 2018. Didn't that come out of this interview?
That's right. Yeah, it did come out of this interview as well. Yeah, so there was he did confirm that they've got no plans to bring out anything in 2018 to supersede the Rift. They were talking about the Oculus Go, and they were also talking about Project Santa Cruz in this, but he did make a point of saying that. So, it's going to be 2019 at the very earliest before we get a successor to the Rift.
And that's kind of frustrating. Like, I wouldn't mind if they went Sony's route and sort of had a Rev 2. Like, especially if this Oculus Go has the improved lenses. And I don't think we know the resolution on that yet. I don't think they've come out to say. Maybe they have. And I'm just misremembering. But now, each headset that comes out is kind of slowly dialing up the resolution. The Windows MR headsets, and now they're talking about improving the lenses. Like, I would like a Rev 2 or something. Like, give me a way as an enthusiast to get those better lenses. Like, it's just going to be totally weird if the Oculus Go has better lenses and a better resolution than my Rift, when the Rift is supposed to be the sort of the top of their product line.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, because like the PSVR, you've got the Rev 1 and then the Rev 2, it's a very incremental difference between those two things. And whether Oculus, they could bring out, I don't know whether they have actually improved the production line and got things streamlined in that respect and have made the Rift slightly different without announcing anything, like the Vive. The Vive came out, and apparently the Vive now, the new headset that you buy is sort of 15% lighter than the original one. There wasn't really anything sort of formally announced, I believe, about that. But I think what a lot of people are asking for with the Oculus is really like a definitive, a very, very big upgrade. So they want an Oculus Rift 2, not just a revision to of the original Oculus Rift. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I'm sure they must have refined some of the production of the Oculus Rift, and it's slightly different now to when it first came out, I would imagine.
I also wonder if, just because Jason Rubin says that they're not going to have CV2 in 2018, that doesn't necessarily absolutely guarantee that, because even if that, I mean, you don't really want to give your information ahead of time like that. I mean, it probably does mean that we're not going to get it. I wonder if this affects HTC in any way, because I kind of believed that at some point in 2018, HTC would have some type of HTC Vive 2.0, maybe built-in wireless. I don't know, some little things added onto it. Of course, we still have the Knuckles question, which is still an open-ended question. The new base stations and all of that, and we still have LG's headset kind of waiting off in the wings. And we do remember that interview with Gabe Newell. They were sitting there at the table, and he was talking about in 2018 higher resolution, wireless baked in. If Gabe says something, it's probably solid gold. So you have to imagine at some point in 2018. So with Oculus saying absolutely guarantee no CV2 in 2018, does this change HTC Vive's decision-making process? Do they look at this and say, oh, thank you for giving us this little tidbit, Jason. Now we know we can wait till 2019, and then we can have a head-to-head situation. Steve, what's your thoughts on that possibility?
It's possible, and they may already know through industry partners, and there's lots of people that I'd imagine go into HTC's offices and have meetings, and then walk out and get on a plane and go to Oculus's offices and have meetings. So these guys probably have an idea of what each other are doing. So this is probably more likely a statement of collusion than it is giving up any sort of competitive edge, which is again, we've said it before. I think Oculus and HTC's focus is on the standalone headsets. For whatever reasons, they're not as focused on the tethered PC experience. And we got Pimax out there. They're going to bring their headset out, hopefully, and other people entering the market. So I think giving it a little more time to bake is probably not a bad idea, especially while they're pushing, at least in the case of Oculus, they're pushing software and still funding it. Although we haven't heard about a continuing, I don't know if 2018 is going to be the year of monthly Oculus funded titles anymore. But pushing the software end and not worrying so much about new headsets makes sense because it gives them more time to focus on, getting the resolution up, making improvements to the lenses. So I think it's okay. The only thing that as I mentioned a minute ago, that squirrels me up is the fact that a cheaper entry level product on their product line may in some ways have the inferior or the superior optics and resolution and stuff, which is just kind of a weird situation to be in. It would be like, the cheap iPhone being better than the top iPhone. It's just a weird situation that you don't normally see.
You just mentioned there about the standalone, and we don't have this on our list here. And I think this has happened since our last episode, but the Vive Focus in China, the price, oh my goodness. Were you guys as shocked as I was? Like $650, $700 if you want the baby blue one. Gary, what do you think about these outrageous prices?
Yeah, I was surprised at that price, but it's got more advanced technology than the Oculus Go, and I guess it's had that's the price it is. That's the price that they're putting this out for. I mean, I'd be more comfortable with that kind of price if it also had 6 degrees of freedom controllers, motion controllers as well. I don't know if just the headset, positional tracking on the headset, is enough to warrant. I mean, that is ridiculous, isn't it? It's sort of $400 more for the positional tracking. In terms of spec sheet, there might be other differences, but when you just look at it.
Yeah, Steve, any thoughts on that?
Nope, you guys covered them. We were way the hell off base. Like, we were like, okay, we expected it to be more than the Oculus Go because it does have the positional tracking. But for that price, you can kind of kit your whole family out with Oculus Goes and watch a movie together and still save money in the process.
Yeah, we were really off the mark on that one. Alrighty, well, that pretty much covers it for all of the news topics that we had going. We can go ahead and get into a little bit of game discussion, and then we also have to get into Dash 2.0 and Rift Core 2.0. So let's go ahead and jump into games. Who wanted to go ahead and start that off?
Yeah, I can. Well, I can talk about Doom VFR. I think Steve wants to talk about that as well, just quickly, because we did discuss it last week. And so I've played through it now. I've finished that game, and I sort of stand by what I said last week. I really enjoyed it. In fact, I've sort of started another campaign, even though I sort of tried to convince myself not to, because I wanted to wait until the game had been patched out a little bit. So I didn't get the freezing issue. This is the problem. The game still suffers from this freezing issue where if you teleport around a little bit too much, it will pause. So that's an annoyance that I really wish wasn't there.
Have you linked it? Have you linked it to teleporting in rapid succession as being the cause? Like, I feel like it just does it when I'm just like standing there sometimes.
Yeah, I think. Well, that was my sort of perception of it as well. I thought the same as you, Steve, but then I have read on other places that it seems to happen more when you're teleporting around. And when I went back in there to restart the campaign, I was sort of testing this out, and it did happen when I was teleporting around fast to various locations. Now, I don't know whether it was just random and that was sort of a coincidence, but yeah, it's such an annoyance in that game. It's sort of it's the one thing that annoys me to the point where I feel like I don't want to play it. Everything else I can get over. The teleport is okay. Now I will say that I went in and tried the smooth locomotion mod on this as well, because I wanted to give this a try, and we had some comments from people last week talking about how the smooth locomotion mod really helps, and I went in there, tried it. I think it's good. It's not such a big difference overall in terms of the game for me. I think because the smooth locomotion mod, it does work really well. If you want to play the game that way, then that's the way to do it. It just works on the trackpad the way you expect it to work. Although I think it is HMD focused, so you can't. It's sort of replacing the WASD keys on the keyboard. So it's not like you can point the controller in a different direction or anything like that, like onward style locomotion. It's HMD focused, so you'll be going in that direction, and it works okay. Because I didn't have such a big problem as some other people with the teleport, I don't think I really want to play the game that way. I'm still comfortable with it, and I know it's not going to be a popular opinion. And there will be people who say, "How can you play it teleport when you've got the smooth locomotion option with this mod?" But I don't know what to say. I still want to play it the way I went through the game. I think it works fine. It doesn't. The one thing I'll say is that it doesn't feel absolutely like a Doom game. Okay, so if you want to go in there for a VR Doom experience, as you probably would playing Doom VFR, you're probably not going to get it with the teleportation. You'll get a closer approximation of that with the smooth locomotion. But if you take that aside and just think of this as a different game, almost, it's a weird thing to say, but if you think of this as a different game and play it in a slightly different way, I think it's just a great game. It doesn't matter whether it's Doom or not. I think it's a great game.
Yep, I agree with everything you said. I completed the game too, and I looked back and I really enjoyed the game. Like there's really no other way to say it. It's a very controversial opinion. I'm in a minority, just as you, Gary, in that the locomotion doesn't bother me. Like I sort of had the feeling that my body was a weapon, with all the telefragging and everything. So that just kind of folded into my attack patterns. Shoot, look for the blue, and then I was just hopping around like I don't know, like Flash or something, with guns, and I think it didn't bother me because of that. It's not, and I'm not saying that I prefer teleport over smooth locomotion. I don't. But I think in this game it just didn't bother me, and I had no issues playing it the way the developer set it up. And again, I know that's not a popular opinion, and most people are going to disagree there, and that's okay. This is why we all have different opinions. But all the things that the game does right, and that's what I guess makes this conversation very interesting to me, is that it almost seems like everybody throws the baby out with the bathwater. Like, okay, you don't like the locomotion method, and I totally get it if you're left-handed. If you're left-handed, like straight up, ID screwed up. Like they should have had a left hand mode in there. But outside of that, like there's so many things this game does right. Like I absolutely love just like the chaos and just shooting everything and just rapidly switching between weapons with the metal music playing, in my ears. And like you can't just ignore all that really good stuff, like the great character models and all that, and say, well, it does this and this bad, therefore it's an unplayable piece of shit. And that's, a lot of people went that far, and I don't think that's very fair, at least in my opinion. So I love Doom VFR. It's not the type of game that I'll replay though, and I know they tried to put some replayability into it with the collectibles and with the classic maps, and I played around a little bit inside one of the classic maps, but it just kind of bored me. I don't think those play the same way, and I never tried the smooth locomotion, so maybe those play better with the smooth locomotion mods. But either or, so I think I'm done with it, but looking back, I appreciated my time with it.
How many hours did you guys get out of it, you think?
3.7. I'm glad you said that, Anthony, because that was another thing. People were saying they were getting through it in 2.5, and I'm not doubting them. And I don't feel like I died that much that that I have a lot of extra time into it, nor do I think I set my headset down and walked away with the game still running. That's a possibility, but I had 3.7 hours clocked, and I played on the initially I was 2 clicks up on the difficulty, but had to back it down to 1 click up, and I forget what they labeled them because they don't call it easy, medium, hard. They call it whatever. I think 2.5 is probably pretty quick. If you knock a half hour off of my 3.7, so maybe call it 3 hours, 3:15, I think is pretty fair.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's about right. I clocked in at around 4 hours, but I struggled with the final section because probably you could probably easily knock off half an hour for that. I just didn't know what I was supposed to do, and it's so basic. I don't. It's sort of embarrassing now.
I did the same thing. I didn't struggle with it for a half hour, but I died one time. I'm like, what the hell am I supposed to do? I'm just taking damage for no reason.
Exactly.
And then the second time through, I realized I missed something, and there was a waypoint. So yeah.
Yeah, I'll reiterate what Steve has said, with the 2.5 hours. I think it's possible. I don't doubt that people have done it in that. And even, the first time through, it's not even like a speed run. I think you can do it in 2.5 hours. But I played through and I wouldn't say I rushed through, but I also wasn't doing it completely thoroughly either. So, yeah, I did it in around 4 hours.
Okay, yeah. It's funny, I have barely played this game. Honestly, I have to make a confession and say that this week I didn't get to play very much VR. So I didn't play much VR in general, so didn't play very much Doom VFR, but I played it a little bit more. One thing I'll say is that the point that I was making that last week, whatever week it was, about the guns kind of being a pea shooter, that's definitely just the very first gun. There's plenty of other guns that are nothing like a pea shooter. And so that comment was definitely out of line, basically. I have had, when I do play it, it's playable, but there's definite performance struggles that are going on. And it's kind of one of those things where if you guys have been in a game where it's playable, but you kind of end up with a headache after you've been playing it because it's got a little judder and you're just kind of like powering through it. That's kind of the way it's been for me. So I have to kind of play it in small bursts, and like I'll die a couple of times and I'll be like, okay, I'm going to take a break. And so I'm still incredibly early in the game. I did try one of the classic levels. I tried, I believe it was Hangar, like the very first level of Doom. And one of the cool things about this is I've said before that I've done, I think it's the GZ3 mod where you can actually play the old classic Doom. And I did that. And I played the old classic Doom with a regular Xbox controller. But the problem with that is the game, I mean, it's not designed, for VR, and it's a hack. And what happens is when I play that old classic one, I end up with just a splitting headache after about a half an hour, 45 minutes of being in it. So even though I'm having a great time and it's cool to be able to explore classic Doom, it's just not worth the headache to me. And this one, there's definitely a difference. Like this has been dialed in, like the walls, the floor, the ceiling, it's been reconfigured into VR in a different kind of a way. What's really weird about it though is like that first level of Doom is like a super easy level in regular old Doom from 1993, but they put, they're putting the Doom VFR enemies in there. And when you first open that one door and those two soldier guys come at you, it's a hell of a lot tougher than it is in old Doom. In old Doom, it's like two shots, bang, 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 they're dead almost instantly. In this Doom, it's a lot harder to kill those guys. It takes I actually died the first couple of times I was going through that door, which I never died in the old Doom. But it's just cool from a nostalgia standpoint of just seeing everything. Shooting the barrels and having them explode modern style is kind of weird. But I really like that classic level. But when the level is over, it's just like, bam, it's just over. And there's no, like, it just kind of goes to like a blank screen. So it'd be cool if they actually dialed in and made the game like have the, you found this many secrets. And they even have the secrets and stuff, which is kind of cool too. But we can go ahead and get to the next one. Gary, you want to jump into the next one?
Yeah, okay. So Titanic VR, we were sent a code for this experience, and I could talk about it. I haven't played a huge amount of this, unfortunately, just yet. But you see, the demo, I think I played something or I heard something about this a long time ago. And I was thinking specifically about, uh, my parents, because my mum's really into like history and that kind of stuff. So I was thinking, this could be something to get her into VR. So I wanted to give this a try. I went in there, and it's made by the same people who did Apollo 11, which was one of the first experience that I did in VR, and I absolutely loved it because I'm a big sort of space buff. I love things like that. So this one didn't appeal to me quite so much, but I still wanted to go in there and give this a try because I knew that they had this history with Apollo 11. Going in there, you can certainly tell that it's made by the same developers. It's sort of very reminiscent of that when you're in there, and so the experience starts and you're in like a submersible, and you move over to the Titanic, and then you have to do these little tasks that it gives you. As I say, I'm very early on, and what the first couple of tasks that I've done are you move these joysticks to coordinate yourself into a position near the Titanic, and then you get into this extra section where you can sort of view almost like through a VR headset. In fact, you can view an extra submersible, almost like a small robotic submersible that you can then guide to an extra section and actually have appendages where you can interact with the environment and stuff in small ways. So you're doing these sort of very basic tasks. That's really as far as I've got so far. But there was some news about this where they were talking about on the subreddit about how accurate the depiction of Titanic is within this experience. And, I think there are some inconsistencies is what they were saying, but overall it's a pretty accurate representation. And I'm interested to go into this experience a lot more. And there's sections where you can select whether you want to play through a story mode or just sort of do an exploration, I would imagine. And I'm interested to go into the exploration. I like the idea of just going around this and just exploring the Titanic as it's rendered within this, knowing that it's pretty accurately rendered. So that's interesting to me. I'll report back probably when I played a little bit more, but that's all I've got to say at the moment.
I gave this a go too, and I didn't like it as much as I'd hoped. Now, I did not go through and play what you were talking about, Gary, and I'd forgotten that I even saw that on the menu till you said it. But I went in and played the game from the beginning like you would going through it, and I won't repeat everything you said, but ultimately you're in that submarine, and there's some controls there, and the controls are kind of awkward, but basically you operate this craft. You have the multiple joysticks in the game that you then use your motion controller to push it forward, backward. So they're trying to give you that very interactive feel, but it's a little bit off. Something isn't quite right for me in the way you actually engage them. But you navigate this submersible vehicle that you, the player, are inside. And then when you get it close to the ship, you can deploy an ROV, which I guess stands for remote operated vehicle. Anyways, it's a robot basically with arms that you see it as if you are the robot once you take control of it, but within the world and within the narrative, your character is still stuck in the submarine type vehicle, remotely deploying this ROV. And you have to do tasks, and again, I think they're still fleshing out some of the controls and the way you interact with the game. The very first thing you do is you place a plaque on the ship, and I didn't know exactly what to do, but eventually you pull up a menu, and there's a plaque in your menu, and you click a button and you place it. But then the second task, and this is where I got hung up. I don't know if you played this at all, Gary, to this point, but you're supposed to go in and find, I believe, the captain's briefcase from his quarters, and I couldn't get to it. See, this ROV has a range from the submarine that you're in, and you can't just go forever and ever and ever. So you have to get your main vehicle close, deploy the ROV, and then it has a limited range in which you can operate in. And I could never actually get to figure out what I needed to do to get the briefcase. I saw one area that was kind of illuminated in blue. It was like almost like an open doorway type thing, but I couldn't figure out what to do to clear the debris out of the way to actually get my ROV in there. So it is a little some work that they have to do to kind of get some of this stuff shored up, or that the average person isn't too tripped up with it. But I think it's a great idea, and as a person, I'm very interested in anything under the ocean. I love to scuba dive and all that, and this is very, very, very interesting to me. So I'm gonna have to spend more time with it, but they have some things to sort out. So from a recommendation standpoint, that's kind of where I am. It's $14.99 if you want to pick this up and maybe give it some more time if you're interested, or if you're a huge fan of history or the Titanic itself, and don't mind hopping into it. Now, it's very much playable, but at the same time, know that there may be some frustrations. I normally don't have frustrations like this, so I think if it's getting me, then there's some things they got to sort out.
I played it a little bit this morning just to try to have a quick little take on it. And I got to the part that Steve was talking about where you take a plaque and you're supposed to place this plaque. And I got to the area, there's a little blue area where that's where you're supposed to place the plaque. And then I opened up my menu and I could see the plaque in my menu, but I tried to hit every possible button. I pointed at it with my robot arms. I tried to do everything. I could not get the plaque, so I was just kind of stuck.
I had the same problem, actually. You were actually, I mean, I don't know whether it bugged out for you, Anthony, but did you try? Because you don't grab it where you think you need to grab it. You have to go beyond it, and then it will highlight. So you actually have to go past the plaque, and then it will highlight. I had the same problem. And just speaking of other little frustrations that Steve mentioned, I had the same frustrations on that second section that you have to do as well. There are things like that in this.
The one thing
did you figure out that second section? You mind telling me?
Not yet. No,
okay.
That's where I am at the moment. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
The one thing I did like about it, though, is and I was only in there for like 10, 15 minutes, so barely touched it. But when you're first approaching the Titanic and you're in that submersible, there's something about being like way underneath the ocean and like an old wreckage, and just, I don't know, it's creepy, it's eerie. There's something about it. And I did get that kind of vibe. And then when you do get that little remote operating vehicle and you're moving that around, I did see some fish. I saw like some different little sea life that was moving around, and I looked at it closely and it looked pretty good. It was animated pretty good. And there's something creepy about that, just because that people died there.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I think it's because it's real. Like, not that this is a game, you're seeing a rendered thing, but that out there is a Titanic ship at the bottom of the ocean, and it might look like this. I imagine it looks like this. They've done their research, and yeah, I think that's what it is, and it's what I find so fascinating. Like, if this wasn't based on reality,
and like sound effects kind of make it hyped up a little bit as well. I mean, add to that like creepiness factor. Yep. Alrighty, well, the last one we're going to get to here is Droid Repair Bay, Star Wars Droid Repair Bay. I'll go ahead and kick this one off. So the interesting thing is, I forget which day this came out, but the first day it came out, I tried to run this a bunch of different times, couldn't get it to run. Next day, tried to run it a couple times, couldn't get it to run. Then last night, I was like, you know what, let me give this one more try. And you know what I think my problem was? I think maybe it would have ran all those different times, but I didn't allow it enough time to just finally load up. And I was just waiting in the headset forever. See, this is a problem that I get into. Steve, I know you've learned over the years, you don't go into the VR thing until you like see it on your screen, right? On your monitor. And a lot of times I'll start up some VR thing because I don't know, I just don't want to miss like intros and stuff. And so I want to have that headset on right when it starts, and I'm waiting there forever. And I get into problems like that. But anyway, I finally was able to get this thing to work. And maybe it's because I had like lowered expectations because I heard reports of other people that played this and it didn't seem like a lot of people were like ranting and raving about it. I actually thought this was fantastic. I thought it was awesome. I love the music of it. The 3D audio was great. I was quite blown away by it. And I don't know if it's just the standpoint of, again, like this lowered expectations, but I liked what they did from the standpoint that you have these windows out here where space is, and then you have these other glass windows. And what they did was they kind of use full motion video and like rendered video that's on the outside. And so you're in this place where everything is rendered and these things are happening. But if you look towards the windows, like every once in a while, you'll see something going on outside the windows. Somebody will run by and they'll stop and they'll knock on the glass or something. And I really felt like all the 3D audio, like the 3D audio is damn good. The music is good. The special effects, I really liked it. It's very simple. There's not a ton of things that are complicated that are going on, but I thought it was fantastic. But why don't we go ahead and kick it over to one of you guys?
Yeah, I played this too. Because it's by the people that made what is the other one that came out by the same studio? It's like a
Trials on Tatooine.
Trials on Tatooine. That's the one. Yeah. So it's a little bit more in depth than that. There's more stuff to do in this one, and actually it looks better as well. Because when this first came out, I heard a lot of people saying it looks blurry, and I was thinking, well, that makes sense because the Trials on Tatooine looked pretty blurry as well. It wasn't rendered particularly well, at least when I played it. But this one looks clear. I mean, it looks really, really sharp, and the graphics are great. But yeah, like you, I mean, I think it's good. I'm probably not as blown away with it as you are, but part of the reason I liked it is these sort of glimpses outside of the windows, both sides. You've got the people that are running by on the corridor, and then outside, I won't spoil anything, but as the experience progresses, you have a cool little section at the end as well that sort of made it for me, I think. Other than that, it was quite plodding and very, there's not a lot to it. You're just sort of doing these very, very basic tasks of repairing these droids, and, there's no challenge. It tells you what to do, and you're just going through this experience. But as a complete experience, it lasts probably, I don't know, 10 minutes maybe. And I thought it was good. Yeah, it's free. So yeah, why not give it a try?
And I can't comment on it because I didn't play it.
Ah, man. Well, what I'll say a little bit more about it is like BB-8, when you get these robots, right, you use this like mechanical arm. The robots are over there and you have to repair them. And so you bring them over to where your little repair station is. And when it lowers them down and they're at your repair station, like I was just looking at BB-8 and like looking really close at it. It was crystal clear as far as I was concerned. Like everything was clear. And the little robots, they're so cute. I mean, they are so adorable. They're like little puppies running around. They make them it's almost cuteness to the point of too much cuteness where you almost want to strangle yourself. They're making them so cute. But the way they have sparks, there's lights, there's audio. They use a lot of little tricks that don't require a lot of horsepower for your computer to run, and it's almost they're tricking you in a way. It's kind of like the Buzz Aldrin thing and like rendering backgrounds where it's just one static image, but then they have a thing that's moving in front of that background, and so it kind of tricks you into thinking the whole thing is being rendered. And these little droids they're rolling around on the ground. They have these little openings that they go into. You have to grab the robots and try to put them in this certain spot. I thought it was fantastic. And the thing that I like about this too, this is Star Wars. Okay. So the new movie comes out on December 15th. I have two boys that they're into Star Wars. They're not really into VR. I've tried to get them into VR. They're just, I don't know. They're not that wowed by VR. They don't care about VR that much, but they're huge fans of Star Wars. And I haven't shown them this yet, but I know that this is the kind of thing you can show to like a wife or an uncle or somebody. If they're fans of Star Wars, I think there's enough here and it's easy enough. And I think it's a magical experience. I was really quite taken. Again, I think it's the lowered expectations because I went into these threads where people were trashing it. And so I was kind of expecting it to be a complete and total dud. And I was really surprised.
Yeah, no, it really isn't. One thing I will ask you, Anthony, did you feel like, because the first part of the experience, it didn't really feel very Star Wars to me, even though you're working on these BB-8s kind of droids, repairing them. There was something about it. It just didn't really feel like rooted in Star Wars for me, that first section. As it progresses, I felt increasingly like it was more like a Star Wars experience. But I don't know if you've got any thoughts on that, whether
yeah, I mean, it definitely feels more Star Wars later into it when they have like laser blasting and the lights are flashing and sparks and the music is stirring. See, that's the power of Star Wars. That's what they have here. And I honestly think this is way better than Trials of Tatooine, in my personal opinion. But one of the things you notice at the very start of it, though, is that one robot that's kind of helping you kind of looks like the First Contact robot, you know, from Oculus First Contact. And then also when you're repairing the robots, it's incredibly similar to robot repair in the lab, you know, some of the little things that you're doing when you're repairing the robots. And so it's kind of obvious to me that ILM X Labs, they've played First Contact, they've played robot repair, you know what I mean? Because you can see that in the experience. But when I ran through it, it said 20 minutes, and then I did it again, and it was 40 minutes. So I think this actually takes about 20 minutes from the very beginning to the very end.
Oh, maybe, yeah. I just, you know, when you're in VR, it doesn't.
Yeah.
I mean, actually, usually it's the opposite thing, but it didn't feel like I was in there for very long. But yeah.
I did get some Steam achievements popped up because I like I forget what different things popped up, but I was guiding the robots into the repair thing. I mean, I was really working them back into their repair spot because they try to get away from it.
If you're a fan of Steam achievements, then definitely play this because they're popping up constantly when you're just doing basic things, really. Yeah.
So, do you guys have tickets for the movie next week? You guys I don't have tickets. I'm probably not going to see it on launch night or anything, but I do want to see it, and then, you know, in the saying the first week or so that it's out.
Oh, it'd be. I think I'll save it until sometime in January for me. Yeah, I'm not going to sort of brave the crowds at the cinema night.
Usually, what I find is like if you just avoid like the first 4 or 5 days, that's when it's kind of chaotic, and then see it after that, and it's a little bit easy. That's probably what I'll do. So not right away, but like 5 days later, I'll check it out. I'm sure my kids will probably be there day one, though. They're hardcore about it. All right, so that pretty much covers all our games and stuff. So now we can go into our Rift Core 2.0 discussion. Myself personally haven't spent a ton of time in this, so why don't we go ahead and have Steve start it off?
Sure. So Rift Core 2.0 came out on, I believe it was Wednesday. It's a beta, so you don't get this automatically. You have to go into the settings and opt into the public beta channel. It's just a little radio button, and then it'll download and install itself. All in all, like there's a lot to talk about here. Like it's almost don't know really where to begin, but Rift Core 2.0 is sort of multiple aspects to it. First, you have instead of that default home where, you know, everyone had the rug that wasn't all the way smoothened out that drove OCD people crazy, and you sort of had that menu in front of you that you had no options. Now it's really a lot like Steam VR Home, where you have a home environment that you can customize, and you can unlock things from games. You get cartridges, like, you know, there's a little Kronos and Lucky's Tale cartridge, I'm assuming if you have those games in your library, which I do. You can build a whole home and do all that. And honestly, that I didn't spend that much time doing that because that's not something that I'm particularly interested in. I don't spend, like, when I go to play VR, I'm going to play a game or do something, so I don't necessarily screw around in my home environment too much. one thing it does do is it lets you put pictures on the wall, and I do wish I could like bring pictures from my desktop in like a picture of my family or something. Like I think it would feel more like home if I could look on the wall, and you know, my wife and kids and stuff are there. So that would be one feature I'd actually like from home. But then it also has the dash aspect of the software update, and they've also redesigned the store interface and the way you interact both with the app on desktop and when you're in the headset. And the dash is probably where we'll spend most of our time talking, so I won't jump into that. But the store updates are also pretty nice. When you go in and you open the store, it moves you into a different part of home, and you're in this bigger room, and there's a theater screen, which I almost wonder if like there's going to be a way they have you playing movies on that screen. I didn't see a way yet, but there's a lot to do, and you'd have to spend hours exploring everything, so I have not made that time investment. But the store navigation itself is you get a you see the store, and you have a few more categories. So I think you were talking about that last week, Anthony, where you wanted to be able to find things and make a little more sense from the store layout. So I think they've done better. It's still probably not that great, but it's a definite improvement. But what I like more is like when you click on a game in the store, on your right side, you immediately get a trailer playing. On the left side, the reviews pop up, and you can easily scroll through reviews. So if you're actually making purchase decisions, which ironically is something I never do. I never buy a game within VR for some reason. I always do it in the desktop app. But I don't know if other people operate that way, but if you buy games while you're inside the headset, I imagine this is a much improved experience. So I don't talk too long. I'll send it over to Gary. What are your thoughts on 2.0, or if we want to get straight into Dash?
Yeah, I think you've said it all overall on the 2.0, and we can talk about Dash because that was one of the main features that I was interested in. Really, I'm the same as you in terms of home. You know, I like what they've done. I think it's great, but it's not really where my focus is. So the Dash aspect is this thing where you can press the Oculus button, and then you'll get a carousel in front of you with various options. So you can change settings. You can then see your monitor on there as well, bring up monitor windows, and then you can also have the ability to tear these windows out and place them at various locations around you. So I guess, you know, I'm talking to people that are into VR anyway, so they know all this stuff anyway. But going in there and actually trying this out is interesting. And actually, when I first went in to, really go into like the monitor display, I felt like Dash overall wasn't as immediately intuitive as I wanted it to be. That's the first thing I want to say, because I wanted to go in there, and you see these videos of how easy everything is, you know, how easy this person is manipulating all these windows, placing them all around her and doing this stuff. And it does work like that. It's just, it didn't come to me as naturally as I expected. And like I say, initially a little bit disappointed. Having persevered with it and gone in and used it a little bit more, I thought, okay, this is pretty good now. I can manipulate these windows. I can tear out windows and place them around me. So if I wanted to watch YouTube or Netflix or whatever, I can place that in various locations around me, and that's great. So it was pretty much like a virtual desktop kind of experience at that point. So I thought, this is good. This is sort of what I wanted. And then when I went into some games and experiences, and just having this option to back out of those experiences, if you're playing a game, say, you know, whatever, it doesn't matter, you know, Doom, for example, if you feel like you need a break, you can pause the game, just come out and go onto your desktop. You can view all of your windows that you want to. You can watch a YouTube video for a few minutes, or you can go onto Reddit and, you know, go on, see some stuff on there, whatever you want to do, just to take a break. I like that option in there, so that you don't need to take your headset off in order to do this. And that was really where it hit me. I felt like I could use it for that feature alone, really. I think it's a worthwhile upgrade just for that. And as I was going through, I had a few problems because I'm running a 3-monitor setup. Now, in order for this to work, the tear out function, the window tear out function to work effectively, properly, you need to have a display, a port on your GPU that is empty, so you've not got money to going in there. Presumably, this is to do with some kind of way it's just manipulating it. It's creating a virtual monitor using that port. So I had this error come up because I'm running 3 monitors. All the ports on my GPU are in use. So I had this error come up, and it meant that I wasn't able to tear out Windows. And yet, when I went in there, I could bring up the desktops and still utilize it in a really useful way. And actually, sometimes I was able to still tear out a window. Even when I was running 3 monitors, I could tear out my email program, and it would actually pin as you expect it to usually. So I guess this is something that's sort of inconsistent, and they're bringing up this error message just to safeguard themselves in some way. But yeah, so I had a few little problems with that. I disconnected one of my monitors and then used it in the way it was supposed to be used. Well, let me pass it back to Steve on this, because I've got a few other things to say, but I don't want to talk too long. What do you think overall on Dash?
No, I like it. I think it has some very specific uses, and that's the rub. We're not in a space where I'm going to be, doing work from within VR. I'm not going to be sending emails or drafting documents, whatever. But there are moments. So like I was in home, and I pulled up the last VR Roundtable episode, and I had it docked from our webpage, and then I also pulled up a Watch ESPN page and had it docked, and I was shooting baskets on the little basketball goal that they put inside the default home, and all this worked. And then I also went into Robo Recall and had a couple windows open, and there were some performance impacts. It did not like playing multiple videos while also playing a game like Robo Recall. Functionally, though, I found that, one would say, well, why would you want to pin something in a game like Robo Recall? Why would you ever want to have a video? And I would say sports fans have an immediate need for this. If you take the window and you actually put it at your feet, it doesn't impact the game at all, or that you're playing. But if you're trying to keep track of the score, or you're curiously interested in the content, you can just look down and see the score of the game, or whatever it is that you're looking at. So there is some function there, and I found that it could work even in a high-speed action game. And then of course, if you're playing something like Elite Dangerous, which is something I've never played, but I hear you talk about it a lot, Gary, you could dock a Netflix window or whatever, and I imagine all this would work really, really well. The way it works and it wasn't intuitive, and I almost wish they had a tutorial or something, because you sort of have to go through and thumb through and fill all of this out on your own. But you bring up a monitor, but that monitor is only in the menu, and then you have to hit a pin button that pins it and makes it static, so that when you come out of the menu and are actively playing your game, that the view is still there. From there, it's, when you're actually grabbing a window and doing things, it's a little clumsy until you really figure it out, because you have to grab in the right spots. Like I would try to grab the whole desktop view and just to reposition it, because I was playing with all the different placement options, and it was constantly grabbing a window and tearing it out instead, or grabbing an app and tearing it out. And then I learned that I need to grab it on the perimeter. And then it took me a while to find the keyboard, before I realized that the keyboard portion is also at the bottom where you pin a window. There's a keyboard icon, and you can bring up a virtual keyboard and type in web addresses and all that. So I think I'll use it sparingly. I don't think it's something that I'm going to, it's going to be part of my daily use routine or anything like that. I think there'll be very specific moments. If I'm playing a game like Wilson's Heart and I'm struggling with what the hell do I even do? I don't know what to do. You can certainly go to YouTube a lot easier than you ever could before, and you technically don't have to come out of your headset, which is a good advantage. But all in all, I don't see this being, and I'd love to hear any of our listeners want to comment. I don't see outside of maybe Elite Dangerous, a day-to-day, every time I'm in VR, I'm using Dash to do something. And also one last comment, the placement could be a little better when you're placing windows. It has some sort of intelligence to it that if you get close to you, it wants to do a curved display, but you get further out, it wants to flatten out, and that's all fine. But but then if you trying to place it, say, on a wall inside your home, it will let you actually place it behind the wall, and you'll have some transparency type things. Comparing it to Cliff House on the Microsoft MR headsets, Cliff House was a little more intelligent in that way, in the way it intelligently detected surfaces and placed things on them. So they could do some improvements there, and it's probably in their roadmap. They are coming out and saying that this is in beta still, so it's not like they're saying this is final form, we've made it perfect, but for a beta, it's largely really good.
Yeah, I think it's important to say that it is, early days for this. It is a beta, and you need to go in there with that expectation. The first time I went in, and immediately, because I was expecting a lot from this, immediately when you first go in, you are hit with all of these problems that are so easy to see, and you just think, why didn't they do this, why didn't they do that? This is the thing, they give us they give us this update, and all we want is more. And that's the way I feel. I feel like I want this to be better. It's good, and I actually disagree with you on one point, Steve, because I think this will be a daily thing for me. I think I will go in there and use this, because just for the fact that I don't need to take the headset off, I think that in itself will be useful enough for me to use it on a daily basis when I go into VR. Not for everything, and possibly I won't use it for quite so much as I think. There are a couple of problems with this as well. Now, in terms of pinning the desktop or applications to around you, that's exactly what it is. You can only pin them to like a perimeter that is around you wherever you are. You're not able to pin them to sort of real virtual world positions. So, for example, what I want to do ideally, I could go into Sports Bar VR, and in Sports Bar VR, you have these TVs that are up on the walls. That are just playing just random clips of things. Now, ideally, what I would love to do is to go into that experience and then pin a window on top of that TV for YouTube or Netflix or whatever, and then you're then able to teleport around Sports Bar VR and play pool as you would normally, and that YouTube clip will then remain on the TV no matter where you are in the world. That's not possible with this. You can't do that with Dash. It just doesn't work that way, and it's sort of baked in. I can't see that ever working with this, because it's baked into the hardware, and the software of the Oculus Rift. It's not integrated with any of the applications that you're using in the Rift, so it doesn't have it communicate in that way, which is unfortunate. I'd love for that to happen. And also the other thing is Netflix. On Chrome, whenever I run Netflix, and this happened on OVR Drop, which is a similar thing to what Dash offers as well, for some reason I get performance hits, and it's only with Netflix. It doesn't happen on YouTube. So I just wonder why that would be, but it's obviously something to do with the way Netflix renders in browsers, and whether it happens in Internet Explorer or whatever. I only really use it in Chrome, so I don't know, but so yeah, there is this consideration if you want to particularly watch Netflix applications. The final point I'll say is there is this thing. So say I wanted to set this up into Elite Dangerous, and I wanted to pin a YouTube clip onto the cockpit of Elite Dangerous, and I wanted it to remain there. That's all well and good, but because this Dash doesn't communicate directly with the application that you're using, there's a disparity between what the application thinks is facing forward and what Oculus Dash thinks is facing forward. So if I wanted to reset my view in Elite Dangerous, it would move the cockpit slightly depending on where my HMD is, but that would then mean that Dash would alter the position of the relative position within the game of this YouTube window, and that's an annoyance. There's a problem there, and that really needs to be sorted out, because that really impacts the practical use of this for me. But yeah, overall, I'm pleased with it. I want to get used to it a little bit more, and I hope they expand this to have some of the other features that I really want in there.
Yep, with what you were just saying, I was playing around, so I had a window up while I was playing Robo Recall, and I got it as close to me as I could. and then I'd take my head and I'd poke around to the back side of the window, and it is the back side of the view. It's completely inverted, so they almost treat it like an object. But then if you take your hand while you're holding a gun, and you can place it behind the window and it behaves as you would expect, but then you bring it up and bring it in front of the window, and it still disappears. It's almost like it's what's one of those art the mental design things where, like, the guy running up the stairs in a loop, those artistic things. I forget what they're called, but it's like that. Like, it completely messes with your mind, because its physics aren't supposed to be that way in the layering and in the vision and the placement. But it goes back to the complications of AR. We are now we're not transposing real life, but we're transposing a non-game element into this rendered world in 3D space, and software is going to have a hard time knowing what is supposed to be in front of what. And you definitely see it with Dash. Like, it doesn't operate, like you say, in the way that you want it to, in terms of keeping the exact position you want, and all that. So I think it's something they'll sort out. Maybe, I don't know if they have anything at the sort of the SDK or API level where they can, detect surfaces in games, and use that in Dash to keep things placed where you might want them. But it's all very interesting, and all in all, like, I'm very happy with the update. I think this is bringing a lot of functionality. I'm not sure just how much I'm going to use it yet, but it's moving the industry forward. Obviously, this is very inspired by Microsoft and Cliff House and some of that functionality, and I can only imagine that Valve is going to start working on some sort of similar integration into OpenVR, and there's really, you can't speak of it bad in that sense and from that perspective, because there's no downside, and I think it's quite fantastic that we're having evolution this early on.
Yeah, so my take on the whole thing, it's kind of funny, but I don't know. I guess I just have this disconnect when it comes to doing things on my computer monitor and playing a game at the same time. Like, I don't, in my brain, I just don't even put those two things together. And so I just think of taking off the damn headset, like, if I want to do something. Now, I understand that this provides benefits where you don't have to take off the headset. I think really the biggest problem for me is, like, when I'm wearing a headset, there's eye strain. There's some level of discomfort. The resolution just isn't there yet. The comfort of the headset itself isn't there yet. And this might be more for me in particular, because the Rift for some reason just pinches on the sides of my head. And so it's not comfortable for me to wear the Rift for long periods of time. But even if the comfort was purely there, I just don't feel like the resolution, the eye strain, like, I can't, people want to, like, live in VR for hours and hours and be able to put screens all over the place and do their email. And some people are talking about on, like, the Vive subreddit, can you spend an 8-hour day working in the Vive? Hell no, I don't think so. We're not there yet. Now, I know there's going to be a future when we are there, but I think we are far away from that future. And so the idea of, like, pinning YouTube windows and like Reddit over here and having my email over there and playing Robo Recall at the same time, I don't think I'm anywhere near that, because I just, like, the eye strain of it all, and just the comfort level. It'll be a beautiful day when I can wear a headset for 3 hours and feel no ill effects whatsoever, no strain on my face or head, no eye fatigue, no slight headache coming out of VR. So that's all of my issues. I did screw around in the home area, and that's what I liked. I tried out the 3 different home samples that they had, and I think it's a beautiful environment that you're in. That first one you're in with the pirate ships, and it almost kind of looks like Naboo, like the architecture of the buildings that are out there. And
just,
you have
just
the
quickly,
little,
Anthony, sorry, on that point about that scene, I just wanted to bring that up, actually. Did you feel like the scale was wrong outside? inside I felt it was great, and then whenever I looked outside, everything seemed a little bit too big for some reason. I don't know if that hit you at all, or
Yeah, no, I didn't really notice. The one thing I did notice though is I got really close to the edge and I was like looking over the edge. I got a little bit of a fear of height sensation, which whenever I feel that in a VR thing, I'm kind of impressed by that because I normally don't feel that. And so I feel like when I do feel that, it's almost like, oh, they did a pretty good job with this. If I'm actually feeling it, what I wanted to do is teleport down to where those freaking pirate ships were, and it almost like it does a little like line, but it's like red. It won't allow you to teleport down there. But just that room that you're in, that bird that's flying around, with the little polygons trailing off of it, and then when you go to those other environments and it has little hummingbirds that are flying around, and there's like this one sample environment where it's almost like some little forest, like goblin, gremlin little creature that's hiding in the bushes, all of that was really cool. Of course, it's the kind of thing though where it's like, okay, once you screw around with it for a couple of days, are you ever going to do it again? Do you really need to do it again? But I do remember being the person that was complaining when I was first in home. You're in this beautiful home, you see that fireplace over there, you see this artwork over there, and I wanted to teleport, and go explore. And so now you can kind of do that. So that is cool. And then eventually when we have people that can come in and share the spaces with us. And I agree with Steve. It would be really cool if you could put some of your own pictures up. Of course, you'll end up in someone's shared space and they'll have some really inappropriate pictures plastered all over their walls as well. So maybe that's one of the reasons they don't do it. But anyway, guys, that's going to pretty much wrap it up, I guess. Is there any other things you guys wanted to comment on? We've been going for quite a while here.
No, that's okay.
Okay, so that's going to go ahead and do it for episode 65 of VR Roundtable, and we'll see you guys next week. Have a wonderful weekend.
See ya.
Bye.